What is up, world? It's your boy Ton, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. If you were with me last week, you would have heard my conversation with Scott Carson on note investing. This week is the second half of my conversation, so without further ado, please enjoy. When you're actually purchasing the note from the lender, from the original lender, what does that process look like? Because usually when we're buying commercial real estate, it's a purchase contract, dot your I's, cross your T's, wire the money, you're good. What does that process look like on the note side? Do I'm sure there's a contract somewhere too, right?
Oh, no. We're just showing up with a box full of money. You know what I mean? like a cocaine deal gone bad in Colombia, So we do our due diligence, collateral, all the banks provide collateral files, and then we wire money in. There's no title company to close at. Because we're not changing title. Remember, the borrower is staying in place, we're not changing, we're just taking over the note. Now, if you're doing a sizable amount and you're funding with a company not funded, where you may use an attorney as a mediator, set up an escrow account with them where you're wiring the money in. The bank sending over what's called an assignment of mortgage, which transfers docs or the assignment of leases or assignment of rents, And then that's what happens. Basically, money's wired, and then the assignment of mortgage shows up the next day. Now you're the lender. You go get that recorded, and then you take over. If they've already started the foreclosure process, then you're getting an assignment of counsel. You're just stepping into the bank's shoes and, either finishing the foreclosure or then reaching then out to the lender or the borrower and say, hey, I know you're facing foreclosure. Can you do anything? Or what's the story behind the story? And the overwhelming thing that's amazing is that I think the biggest opportunity right now, anywhere, bar none, is small balance commercial stuff. And by small balance, I mean under $5 million for the most part. Because what happened in this whole recession thing is a lot of the local banks financed about 70% of the commercial stuff that was being bought and sold. Whereas in the previous recession, Wall Street was gobbling up everything, right? Well, now you've got, I call it Wall Street investments, but with Main Street funding. And so Main Street, the banks aren't in the property management spot, and they've got all this small balance stuff that Wall Street doesn't want to touch. But investors like you and me, that we have opportunities and know the lay of the land or the markets, or we have relationships, can really capitalize and take stuff over. And the nice thing too, it's different about buying a note versus buying a property a lot of times, is if it's like $1 million or more balance, the bank might very well finance your note purchase. So think about how crazy that is. Oh, we got a note, we don't want to own the property on, we're not getting paid on, but we'll technically finance you taking this off our hands at a discount, which is kind of weird, but it happens.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Can you loan me money so I can buy this non-performing loan?
They're not lending you money. Can you just bring 10 or 20% down, and we'll just basically set up this loan on the opposite side of the balance sheet so it offsets our loss.
That makes sense. So are there any immediate red flags that instantly make you just walk away from a note automatically? Nope, not touching it.
Yeah, the number one thing, and it's whether you're buying residential, commercial, never buy a note you don't want to end up owning, okay? So I don't like unfinished projects. I don't mind rehabbing stuff, but I do not want unfinished projects. That's the worst thing. I don't want to go in there and try to track down, building permits and plans and all that stuff. That's not worth my time. I don't want that at all, okay? I prefer occupied assets. That's always better than vacant assets. I wouldn't touch office building right now with a 10-foot pole if I was anybody out there. Multifamily, you got to be very, very careful on stuff like that. We just had this month in Houston alone, over 4,000 units go to foreclosure on over $1 billion in commercial debt from one property owner. Lost $1 billion portfolio. It's over 5-6 properties. So multifamily's got some opportunities, but you got to make damn sure you're buying it right. And stuff like that. So those are things. First one, never buy a note you don't want to end up owning. Second of all, if you don't want to foreclose, don't buy debt, because you got to foreclose at some point. You don't run a charity. I donate to them. And that's why you hire attorneys to handle the foreclosure process to deal with that. You don't want to be in that, back and forth with a bar. Let your attorneys handle that or your servicing company handle that. That's the thing. And then I think the best thing to do for right off the bat is stay in areas when you're starting off that have populations. Don't deal in small towns until you're familiar. So, like, I grew up on the coast down by Corpus Christi in this little small town called Ingleside, Texas. Ingleside, Texas maybe has 9,000 people in there. Well, I think that's way too small a market for somebody right off the bat, unless you know that market, right? So stay in most of your, cities that have 25 or 50,000 or more, plenty more opportunities. It's easier to get stuff done in those bigger cities too. So, and then another thing is always ask what's really going on with the asset, because the bank will tell you one thing, the borrower will tell you something else, and you've got to piece it in the middle to see what's really going on in a lot of cases.
The problem is you can't really talk to the borrowers in many cases until after you close the note, right?
Well,
So
but
that's a big challenge.
the best thing though is payment history and servicing notes. So if you see that the borrower's not been calling in, you know that the borrower is a deadbeat kind of beat. You know what I mean? Because most of the time, responsible people are going to be calling the bank, hey, I'm trying to do this, or they're going to submit like a modification request or some sort of forbearance agreement. There's going to be notes and letters that back all that stuff up. If I don't see any of that stuff, I'm like, okay, this borrower is probably likely I'm going to have to foreclose on, especially if they're more than 12 months or 12 more months behind. You see what's happening right now. You see a lot of performing or mature defaults where the loan was for 3 years or 5 years, and that term has changed, and the borrower's still paying on time. They just can't get refinanced out. I'm like, okay, well, that's not so bad. What can we buy it at, and what's their existing payment they're paying? Will that make good yield to us? Or if we have to adjust, recast the loan, is it going to be a good deal for us? But that's the thing is, commercial deal is its own kind of story in a lot of cases. Residential is pretty easy to turnkey a lot of stuff. The commercial stuff, you just got to know what's going on with that asset, that borrower, and the marketplace too.
Sure thing. Can you share a couple of cool or creative ways you've done this note investing? Maybe something where, and I know I've learned that you can turn a non-performing note into a performing note by working with the borrower in some way, shape, or form, right? So, are there any other creative ways to structure a note, whether it be with the original lender or the borrower, or restructuring the note so that it becomes a performing note or profitable, if you will?
So I'll give you a story. I had a guy that came to me. He was an investor, a real estate. He didn't technically own. He had taken over a mixed-use self-storage facility in South Carolina. Okay, so he took it over subject to the existing financing. So his name was on the mortgage, but he was paying the mortgage and operating this property. The borrower kind of technically walked away, deeded it over to him. And so he was struggling to stay afloat. So he came to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. What bank is it with? And he goes, well, it's with Palmetto Bank. I'm like, oh, I know the asset manager at Palmetto Bank. So I call the asset manager up and say, hey, you got any commercial notes you're looking to sell? And sure enough, he sends me this list of 20 notes. And guess what's on that note? This one self-storage mixed use spot. So I said, oh, okay, what do you want for it? They want like 70 cents on the dollar. And I went back to technically the borrower on this. I said, listen, here's what they're willing to sell the note for. Can you raise capital to buy your note out? And he could do that. He had some investors that would fund him at a lower rate. And so that's what happened, is we basically brokered the purchase of his own note. Now, the bank would have never sold it to him if it was the same borrower name or the same person on the LLC. So it was completely through a different attorney, right? Sold it, and the attorney office was representing investors that immediately just did a quick, basically refinance, and forgave 30% of the balance on that note because they were pretty excited about being in business with the guy. And suddenly, this guy's business went from being basically right on the red area to being fully in the black. And so gave him the extra money to get it leased up, to do a little bit of work. And now it's, I think he refinanced out 2 or 3 years later with the investors, and they were all happy and stuff like that. That's one kind of cool thing. We bought here in Austin, Texas, years ago, one of the most creative deals that we did was a 24-unit, it was an apartment complex next to the University of Texas Law School, all right? And the great thing, they were all kind of individually metered. Well, it needed a lot of work. So the bank came to us and was willing to say, hey, we can't rehab this property, but we know you can do this. If we finance you the note and the rehab costs, would you go in and rehab it and help us sell it off? We're like, you're going to give us the money to rehab this and basically give us the price at a great price. Like, yeah, we'll do that all day. We just want to get this off the books. So that's what we did. We went in, instead of actually converting it from, we took it from an apartment complex, we condo converted it to individual units, okay? Which raised the value per door up to basically $100,000 a door versus like 40 grand, 50 grand a door. And we rehabbed them. But what we did is that we went out to all the tenants who'd been there, or people that were coming in and say, hey, here's an opportunity for you to buy a condo for your students for 4 years. Because if you're going to law school, you usually got pretty good parents that do stuff. So we allowed the parents to go sign. So we originated the paper and then sold the paper off. Got really creative with it, held the seconds in an IRA, but made a ton of money. The bank was happy because they were able to get out of a bad unit to bad property. And you'll see that sometimes, literally, like the Bank of Synovus, which is out of like Georgia, and they have like, I don't know, 10 different banking relationships. They literally will say on their loan sale agreement when you submit your bid in, if you want to joint venture with us, tell us what you have in mind. We may consider it. So that's a little bit different on the commercial, because you won't ever have them do that on a residential note, though. You know what I mean?
I feel like more banks should be more creative like this. This is awesome.
They do. More banks are having to, especially in the multifamily. We just saw a bank up out of Dallas foreclose 2 months ago on three big apartment complexes that were all part of the Tides group. I don't know if you've heard what's going on with them. They're losing like 2,000 units across the country. So they didn't want to foreclose. They didn't want to sell the note at a discount because there was all these liens behind it. So they foreclosed, which cleaned out the title. And they're planning on holding these. And they partnered with another apartment investor who they'd finance some stuff to and say, hey, come on, manage the stuff for us. We'll partner on this and we'll split profits and sale proceeds, what we sell it after 3 years after we regentrify the asset. So that was kind of a unique thing as well. Neat. But you know what I mean? So that's the thing is, it's all about relationships, networking, local mortgage bankers associations, the Chamber of Commerce, that kind of stuff, any servicing conferences. I mean, just talk and find out what's going on with the asset. That's one of the best conversations. Banks will lie to you and tell you they don't have anything non-performing. I was out in Baltimore at a networking event speaking, actually, and a guy came to me, oh, you could call, I got a bank out here who's got a non-performing loan on like in a 40-unit apartment complex. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. I said, what's his name and number? And he's like, oh, so they gave me a name. So I called the bank asset manager up, and he's like, oh, no, we don't have anything. And I sat there for a second. I said, so you don't have any non-performing notes at all? Nothing. And I had his quarterly report pulled up. I said, well, I see right now that you've got about $6.5 million in non-performing stuff that's beyond 120 days late. And I happen to know about a 40-unit apartment complex located at 123 Main Street that's in default and going to foreclosure. And you could hear a pin drop on the other line. He's like, hang on a second. Let me put you on hold.
Called him out. I like it.
You have to call him out. I mean, oh, yeah, I don't have any non-performance. Bullshit, you do. Every bank does. Now, they may not always want to sell it, but yeah, every bank out there has something non-performing, especially in this market.
Have you ever done like a modification of a loan? I know you mentioned recasting earlier. Have you done anything like that while you're in the process of purchasing a note in order to?
No, you can't adjust it before you own it. I mean, if you recast, there'd be no reason for the lender to sell the note. They would just do it over. Now, a chunk of them don't want. Once they get to the point where they don't want the paper, they don't want the paper. But a lot of times they may have tried to work that out originally at specific one point. Because when you're actually the originator, you're kind of tied into it a lot of cases, And once you decide to take a loss, you've got to write that debt off your books. You get a whole lot more flexible on it. But that's the thing is, if I'm into it at 50 cents a dollar, I can be a lot more flexible than somebody who's into it at 95 cents of the dollar, or 80 cents of the dollar. That's why you're starting to see more and more banks, especially probably the last 3 years, if you were doing a commercial mortgage with them, they want you to have a deposit relationship with them. You've got to bring over the deposits. We got the deposits to going in there because that kind of offsets, they're okay, we'll give it to you at 80 cents a dollar, but we got the deposit relationship. So technically we're at 70, 60. We need to be. So just see what's going on. I mean, if it's an ugly asset, it's an ugly asset. I had Capital One send me a list, or actually Amy, my asset manager over there, she called me, hey, Scott, I got a 73-unit apartment complex in Miami that fell out. Would you want it? I'm like, yeah, it's mine. Viva la Miami. He goes, well, it's kind of a rough spot. I'm like, well, okay. Give me 24 hours. So I called my realtor Osmani down there. He drove by and took some photos. And he called me back. He goes, "Man, this place is rough. It is like ghetto fab rough. Like all the crackheads were posing. Yeah, they were like doing something like out of the Dave Chappelle show. Well, doing the whole robot while everybody was walking by." So I send the photos over to Amy, and my phone rings about 10 minutes later, and I can hear her laughing and other people laughing. And she's like, "What do we have to pay you to buy this note from us?" And I'm like, "Well, nothing, because I don't want it." You know what I mean? I don't want it. You're going to have it, and, you better just end up writing off your books and then letting somebody else get it from or pay somebody to deal with it. But it's just, you see stuff like that, and some stuff that's been around for a while doesn't help anything. You want to be active. I've seen people buy notes and then they weren't familiar with it, and they let it sit on their books for 6 to 12 months. And by the time they get around to it, it's gone to tax foreclosure, been wiped out. So you got to double check the stuff like you do in residential stuff as well.
Now, you mentioned a few tips and tactics that you do, and the biggest moral of the story here is networking with the banks, right? What is your secret sauce to maintaining that relationship with them? Do you follow up with them, or what does that look
Great question. And this is probably the biggest mistake all real estate investors do, is lack of follow-up. So for 13, 14 years now, I've been sending out an email once a month to my list of asset managers. And it's always, "Hey, what do you have in your books you're looking to get rid of?" You know what I mean? And it's just the same thing. I've had people tell me it's the green email, because green is my favorite color. I mean, I've got a green screen behind me, but usually it's usually a black brick wall for using something else to do this. But it's just touching base. "Hey, what do you have in your books this month? What do you have in your books this quarter? What are you looking to get rid of?" Asking for referrals. "Hey, do you know somebody?" Because most of these asset managers are networking at the local Mortgage Bankers Association, and they know what's going on at fellow banks. So it's a good relationship aspect, but it's just literally taking that contacts, putting it into a CRM, an email, something, and just sending an email out. When you look at less than 48% of all salespeople follow up with more than one email, that should tell you right there. And, sales, 80% of sales comes after the 5th contact. So that's what we try to do, is email, LinkedIn connection, phone call. Sometimes we'll make 50 to 100 phone calls a day. That's how I used to start doing things. I don't have to do that much anymore. But just touch base. "Hey, what do you have in your books this month?" Oh, you don't have anything in this month. When do you think you'll have something? "Oh, next quarter. You mind if I follow up with you next quarter?" And just doing that. There's systems with text messaging or email or other things that can come in really handy as well to do. And so we've just put the systems in place and just follow. But we're also always looking at new stuff too. I mean, people say, "Oh, there's no note deals." Look, there's not as many note investors out there as there are other people. And all banks won't sell it to you because you're too small. That's a bunch of bullshit. If this Ingledink from Ingleside, Texas, can get banks like Capital One and others sending me notes to take a look at, you guys can do it too, because most of you out there listening are probably smarter than me.
Love that. Love that. Let's talk about funding for a little bit. How are you've done over $1 billion of debt that you've purchased. What does funding look like? Do you raise capital? Do you purchase it yourself? JVs? What is it?
Kind of really all of the above. It depends on the asset. If we have one investor that can, the first thing, let me take it back. We'll always ask the bank, "Hey, on the commercial side, hey, are you willing to carry any of this debt for a period of time? 12, 24, 36 months if we bring in 10 to 20% down." Sometimes we've gotten with 0 down payment where they just like, "We want this. We just don't want the responsibility for it. We'll finance it to you," which is great. So if we've got to bring some down, then we're talking to investors. If we're always constantly raising capital. So if it's like I said, the small amount, 250 to 500, we're buying it. We usually get 1 or 2 investors that'll come in, and we'll put them in an LLC, and we'll raise funds. If it's going to be something, a bigger pool like we're starting to put together now, it's a fund process of raising capital that way. So, it just depends on the asset. If it's a one-off deal and we get one investor to fund the deal, that's always works better, aren't? Makes a whole lot less headaches. But then also some of the bigger stuff we bought, especially for the pools of the residential stuff, we will fund with a fund.
Do you have different pools in your funds for residential versus commercial?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, because
gotcha.
they're completely different asset classes. You know what I mean? So you should have separate LLCs and separate entities for your portfolio too, besides just what you're funding. You know what I mean?
Now, whether it be a one-off or whether it be within a fund, how are you structuring that with your LPs in terms of the returns that they are getting and what
So
the
if it's just
GPs are getting?
so if it's just one investor, and depending on the situation, it all defines on it's about what they're doing. So I'll give you an example. So if we get an investor that comes to us who's been very passive, their money's been sitting in an IRA account, not making anything, and it's a one-off asset they're going to fund, we'll give them 8%, 8 to 10%, because their money's sitting there making nothing, right? But now if I got somebody a little bit more savvy like you come to me and say, well, I got a 500,000, but I want bigger balls than 8%. Okay, well, we buy an asset, we'll go 50-50. We'll create an LLC together. I own 51%, you own 49%. That allows us to legally split the profits down the middle that way. All right. So if it's a fund, then it's going to be basically an 8 to 10% pref with 25 to 50% of the back end, depending on the portfolio of the asset that we're dealing with.
Gotcha. Now, do the investors, and I'm sure these guys that are LPs in the fund that are probably larger funds, they understand how notes work, and they understand that there's a risk of taking over or foreclosing on the asset and taking over the asset, right? So they understand that you might not always get a dividend or a preferred
Yeah.
return
Well, that's
until
the
the
thing is
sale.
that's a very good, that's how we basically structured a lot of stuff. Like, listen, if the borrower's not paying, we're not going to be paying out dividends until these borrowers start paying, or we take the asset back and foreclose. So we always outline that in the front end. That's why we had to start teaching workshops, was teaching people the difference between buying a note versus buying a property. You know what I mean? And so that's why we got the podcast. That's why we go through, because buying it, this is different. Just because I bought that note doesn't mean I own that apartment complex, doesn't mean I'm the landlord now, rolling in rentals. You know what I mean? It's a process of going through that. And that's one of the things, like I said, it's just educating them. Hey, this could be this could be a 12 to 24-month process before we get a dime in on foreclosing. But the fact is that we're buying it at such a good price. If they start paying, great, we'll start paying quarterly. If they don't pay and we got to foreclose, it's still going to come out good. You just got to be prepared for that.
What has been your worst performing note versus your best performing note?
Worst is anything I bought in Chicago. I bought a 10-unit apartment complex in, as I call it, Crook County, Chirac. It was 10 units, and it had 4 mixed units of office, retail on the bottom. And we bought this asset plus 10 others from a hard money lender back in the day. And they'd finance it 70 cents on the dollar, and we were buying it at 49 cents of what they'd finance. So I was like, we're buying this at like 37 cents on the dollar. Woo! Have you ever had to foreclose in Chicago? It is not a pleasant process.
I try to avoid Chicago, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
I've been there. I lost probably about $500,000 on that deal because it took forever to foreclose. Evicting people was horrible to do. They'd break out and break back in. We had one unit we walked into, because we didn't get to see any units before we bought it. I went and walked it, but almost got shot at. I should probably have been the sign not to buy that. But when we walked in, the hot water was on and it had been running who knows how long, because the entire wall was just coated in black mold. The tenant below basically had water and sewage running straight down into her bathtub from the unit above. It was just a shit show. So
Holy shit.
literally, Ron LeGrand likes to say that the smell of shit and piss is the smell of money. Yeah, it's the smell of money either coming in or going out. In this case, it was going out. So do not buy there. No offense. If you live there, it's a different story, because the judges will side with you because you're a voter. But since you're a big, bad out-of-state investor, they don't like to side with you. I got evicted the guy 3 times, and the judge kept giving him like extensions after extensions after sections. I'm like, come on. I finally had to assume in federal court to usurp the Chicago stupid judge, but we were able to do that.
God.
Yeah, that's the worst one. I mean, we've done some interesting ones. Like I wholesaled a 16 unit in LA for a quick $100,000 profit years ago in like 2 weeks. That was really a nice day, and then we bought, like I said, a 300 unit in Indianapolis from Banco Popular back in the day that I didn't have to operate it, but I got a 20% of the profits, which is pretty good because we regentrified it and sold it off 2 years later. So it's just, I like singles and doubles. I like it where we can buy and then we can get a 12 to 20% return on cash flow. That's a great day. That's a really great day.
And those are probably your average return notes.
Yeah, if we're going to buy something, we're going to take the cash flow. We want to see a 15 to 16 yield or greater. That's why, because if we're giving away an 8 pref, that's what we want to make sure of that. And then if we know we're going to foreclose, we're going to want to see at least a 20 to 25% return if we have to foreclose and either sell the asset off, do a deed in lieu, or foreclose. Now, usually if we're going to foreclose and then take it back, it's going to be higher than that because we're usually buying it at a price. So we can then count on the appreciation or the true valuation of the property, not just what's owed on the note.
I love that. Well, Scott, I learned a ton today. I had a blast today. I'm going to have to re-listen to this episode to get my bearings back into place. You know what I mean?
It was an all-you-can-eat wonton wealth mega fest today, like going to your freaking buffet. Well, always glad to help here. I mean, that's the thing is that, look, I've done this for 15, 16 years. I love what you're doing with the podcast. You're doing a phenomenal job. And once again, everybody, if you're listening here, we as podcasters love to hear from you. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review. We'd love to see that. But look, we've got a kind of a cool thing we started doing a couple years back. We've got a free 3-hour course. It's a 1-day kind of dip your toe in the water and learn about how we find these, we fund them, and how we flip them. And that's free to anybody that's interested in sign up for it. You just go to noteweekend.com, and that's a good kind of our Cliff Notes version of our a bigger class. We buy a lot of residential stuff. Residential is pretty easy. Commercial, if you're going to buy commercial notes, you got to understand that each asset class is different, and learning how to underwrite an apartment is different from a self-storage unit. It's different from a mixed use, and then comparing that to how you're underwriting the note. So just keep that in mind. But it always pays to be the bank, I like to say. It's the sexy side of real estate. I don't care if you're brand new, if you've got no money, a lot of private capital out there to fund deals these days. So I'm very excited what the next 24 to 36 months are going to hold for us in the distressed debt space.
And now, before you leave us, Scott, give us a handoff on where that people can find you aside from your website. I know you have a podcast as well. Just throw out all your stuff, and I'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, so we just released our 1000th episode of the Note Closer Show podcast. Been doing it for about 8 years, and 1.5 million downloads, something like that. But our main website's weclosenotes.com. If you go there, you can actually see our classes and book a call with me. And we also, too, this is kind of a cool thing. We just launched the first ever note clone, as we like to talk. So we took our thousands of videos and thousands of articles and blogs and uploaded it all into an AI clone. And now that AI clone can answer questions on your real estate note deals 24-hour a day, 7-day a week. And you can go to our website and click on it and start asking Scott Clone questions and go from there.
Love that. Are you on any social media platforms?
Yeah, I'm on one Scott Carson, just about everything. So not the soccer player from England. That's where on Facebook I get tagged for him. I think I'm better looking than that guy. But anyway, but on all social media, it's usually at one Scott Carson on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those, Twitter as well.
Phenomenal. Scott, appreciate your time, brother.
Thank you for having me, man. Been honored to be here. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.